My brother laughed at my used Honda. 6 months later, he came begging for a loan to rescue his BMW. Can you imagine your own brother mocking you relentlessly, laughing at your quiet, responsible life, all while secretly spending your money? 6 months ago, he was sneering at my beat-up Honda, cruising around in his brand-new BMW, living what he thought was a high life. Then the phone rang, and he was begging me to save his precious car from repossession. What he didn't know was I already had the full story, and I was just waiting for him to finally hit rock bottom. Look, I drive a 2016 Honda Civic. It's paid off, 0 monthly payments, no fancy insurance, no extended warrant I got pressured into. It's just a car that starts every morning, gets me to work, and honestly, doesn't ask for much beyond an oil change. And believe it or not, that car, that perfectly functional, unassuming car, is basically why my family, especially my brother, thinks I'm some kind of failure. My name's Caleb. I'm 28, a software developer. I live in a one-bedroom apartment I could upgrade, but choose not to. I max out my 401k. I've got a 6-month emergency fund. I invest in index funds, and I have 0 debt. I know, it sounds like I'm bragging, and maybe I am a little, but the point isn't that I'm some financial genius. It's that I'm boring, financially boring, and I made peace with that a long time ago. My older brother, Derek, is 31, and he definitely did not make peace with boring. His whole life philosophy has been look rich now, figure out later. He's charming, I'll give him that. The kind of guy who walks into a room, and somehow everyone's already laughing at his jokes. He just has this volume to his personality. People just default to paying attention to him. He always has. Growing up, Derek was a golden child. Teachers loved him. Coaches picked him first, and my mom constantly held him up as her success story. Me? I was the quiet one, got good grades, didn't cause problems. In my family, that translated to doesn't need attention. For years, I told myself it didn't bother me, that being overlooked was fine, because I was building something real, something that would actually matter. Most days, I even believed it. Our mom, Lorraine, has always had this unique way of distributing her energy. Derek gets encouragement, enthusiasm, even financial help when things go sideways. I get told I'm doing fine and don't need to worry. It sounds supportive, right? Until you realize it's code for, I'm going to focus on your brother, because he's the one who actually needs me. Our dad, Frank, split when I was 14. He's in Raleigh now. We talk sometimes. He's fine, but mostly out of the picture. So, about 6 months ago, Derek shows up to a family dinner at Mom's house in a brand new BMW 3 Series. Ice white, tinted windows, still smelled like the dealership. He pulled into the driveway like it was a red carpet event, and Mom actually came out clapping, like he'd won the lottery. I was inside, already helping set the table. Derek swaggered in with his arm around his new girlfriend, Megan, who seemed nice enough in that way people are when they're still performing for a new boyfriend's family. The very first thing out of Derek's mouth wasn't, "Hey," or "Good to see you." It was, "Caleb, you're still driving that Civic?" Megan laughed. Not exactly mean, more like she assumed it was an inside joke and wanted to be in on it. "It runs fine," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Bro, it's a 10-year-old Honda," he scoffed, tossing his keys onto the counter. The BMW fob landed perfectly, logo up. I'd bet money he positioned it like that on purpose. At some point, you gotta stop acting like you're in college. My mom chimed in before I could respond. "Derek, leave him alone. Caleb likes his little car." She said little car the same way you'd say security blanket. Fond, slightly pitying. Dinner was fine, normal. Mom made her brisket, which is legitimately great. I mostly just ate and listened, but the BMW kept coming up. Derek talked about the leather seats, the adaptive cruise control, how it handled. Megan went on about how she could finally ride somewhere without feeling embarrassed, which was a pretty wild thing to say about a car she didn't own. But I bit my tongue. At one point, Mom looked at me and said, "Maybe Derek can take you car shopping sometime, help you pick out something nicer." I just said, "I don't need a new car, Mom." She replied, "I know, honey. I just think you deserve something that reflects where you are in life." Now, Stick with me here, because you need to understand a math that my mom completely ignored. Derek sells insurance. He makes decent money, probably around $65,000 a year. A BMW 3 Series starts at around $45,000 before extras. He'd worked a deal, which in my experience means he got talked into the extended warranty, the protection package, and probably drove off owing closer to $55,000 on a 72-month loan at 6 or 7% interest. That car was going to cost him close to $800 a month for 6 years. I didn't say any of that, though. I just nodded and took another bite of brisket. Here's the thing that really stuck with me. At the end of dinner, when the check came for the extra wine and dessert Mom had ordered, Derek paid in cash, peeling bills off a thick wad he pulled from his jacket pocket. Cash. Derek has never been a cash guy. He's always been the throw it on the card and deal with it later type. Seeing him with that roll of cash felt off. Not suspicious, just not him. I didn't think much of it then. I drove home in my Civic parked and went inside to my quiet, boring, fully funded life. I should have thought about it more, because that cash didn't come from his insurance job. It didn't come from Megan. And it definitely didn't come from his savings account, because I'd find out later he didn't have one. That money came from somewhere I never would have guessed. And by the time I figured out, it was going to change everything between me, my brother, and my mother. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Over the next couple of months, Derek's lifestyle kicked into overdrive. New clothes every week, dinners at fancy restaurants, a weekend trip to Miami with Megan, documented on Instagram like he was a travel influencer. Every single photo had the BMW in it somewhere, parked outside the club, at the beach, at brunch. The car was basically a supporting character in his entire social media feed. And honestly, I'm not the type to get jealous. I truly didn't care what Derek spent his money on. What I did care about was a family group chat, because that's where the jokes about me started picking up. It started small. Derek posted a photo of the BMW at a car wash with a caption, "Treating her right," and Mom responded with a laughing emoji and maybe Caleb should try this sometime. His car could use it. Derek replied with 3 crying, laughing faces. Megan hearted the message. Then it just became a thing. Every time Derek posted something about the car or a dinner or a trip, someone in the chat would find a way to drag me into it. Caleb's probably eating ramen and watching the stock market. Someone sent Caleb a coupon for a car wash. Caleb's Civic is old enough to have its own driver's license. After the 3rd week of this, I muted the chat. I just couldn't deal with it. Then came the Memorial Day barbecue at my mom's place. Extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, maybe 25 people. I almost didn't go, but my Uncle Ray was going to be there, and I actually like him. He's my great uncle, one of those guys who says exactly what he's thinking, which in my family makes him either refreshing or dangerous, depending on the situation. I got there early to help set up. Derek and Megan rolled in about an hour later. He parked the BMW across 2 spots in the street, so nobody would ding his doors. I saw my cousin Tyler notice and roll his eyes, which made me feel slightly better about humanity. The first hour was fine. Normal barbecue stuff. Burgers, beer, my aunt's potato salad that's honestly just mid, but nobody has a heart to tell her. Then Derek started holding court by the grill, and somehow, inevitably, the conversation turned to money. Caleb's still driving that old Civic. Derek announced to a group of about 8 people, including 2 of my uncles and Megan's friend. I keep telling him, "Bro, you gotta invest in yourself. You can't just hoard money and drive around looking like a college kid." I was standing maybe 10 feet away, close enough to hear everything, close enough that Derek knew I could hear. "Derek," I said, keeping my voice even, "you financed that car. You didn't invest in anything. You took on debt." He laughed like I just told a hilarious joke. See, this is the problem with Caleb. He thinks life is a spreadsheet. Meanwhile, I'm actually out here living. A couple people laughed. Not everyone, but enough. My mom appeared next to me and put her hand on my arm. "Caleb, don't start anything. Derek's just having fun." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. "I'm not starting anything, Mom. I'm eating a burger." She said, "You know how he is. Just let him have his moment." His moment. That's what she called it. Like publicly mocking your younger brother was a personality quirk, and not just being a jerk. I walked away and found Uncle Ray sitting in a lawn chair near the back fence, away from a noise. He had a can of Coors Light, and the expression of a man who'd seen enough family nonsense for 3 lifetimes. "Holding up okay?" he asked. "Fine, just the usual." "Your brother's got a real talent for spending money he doesn't have," Uncle Ray said, not even looking at Derek. "Always has. Your grandmother used to worry about that. My grandmother Helen had passed away about 8 months earlier. She was 91, sharp until the very end. She'd left a modest estate, nothing enormous, but she'd been careful with her money her whole life. Her house? Some savings, a small investment account. She'd told me once she wanted everything split evenly between me and Derek, with my mom as co-executor alongside Uncle Ray. Speaking of your grandmother, Uncle Ray said, and his tone shifted. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not angry, more like he was measuring whether to say something. "What about her?" I asked. "Have you gotten your distribution from the estate yet?" "No," I said. "Mom told me the probate process was still ongoing. Said it'd probably be another few months." Uncle Ray took a long sip of his beer. Then he said, "That's interesting, because I signed off on a distribution about 4 months ago." I felt something cold move through my chest. "What do you mean?" "Your mother submitted paperwork for an early partial distribution, $12,000. I signed off because she said both of you needed it for some emergency car repairs or something." My blood ran cold. I didn't get $12,000. I didn't get a phone call. I didn't get an email. "Ray, I never received anything." He stared at me for about 5 seconds. Then he set his beer down and said very quietly, "Well, that's a problem." I looked across the yard at Derek, who was showing Megan something on his phone, laughing. I looked at my mom, refilling the chip bowl, smiling at someone's kid, and I thought about that wad of cash Derek had at dinner, the one that didn't match anything about his life. I didn't say anything else to Uncle Ray right then. I just nodded, thanked him, and told him I'd follow up. He gave me a look that said he understood exactly what was happening and didn't like it one bit. I drove home that night in my Honda Civic, the one everyone loved to joke about, and I sat in my apartment parking lot for about 20 minutes with the engine off. Here's what I didn't do. I didn't call my mom. I didn't text Derek. I didn't post anything online or vent to a friend or do anything that would signal to anyone in my family that I knew something was wrong. What I did was open my laptop and start a new folder. I labeled it Estate. Then I pulled up my grandma's will, which I'd scanned a copy of months ago, because that's the kind of boring, responsible thing I do, and I started reading it very, very carefully. For the next 3 weeks, I acted completely normal. Showed up to work, went to the gym, responded to family group chat with the occasional thumbs up emoji, so nobody would think I'd gone dark. I even liked one of Derek's Instagram posts, a photo of him and Megan at some rooftop bar, because I wanted everything to look exactly the same. But behind the scenes, I was doing what I do best, being boring and thorough. I called Uncle Ray the Monday after the barbecue and asked him to send me the full estate accounting. Everything, the will, the probate filings, the distribution paperwork, the bank statements from my grandmother's accounts. He didn't hesitate. I think he'd been waiting for me to ask. The document arrived in a manila envelope 3 days later, because Uncle Ray is 74 and doesn't trust email. I spread everything out on my kitchen table and went through it line by line. Here's what I found. My grandmother's estate was worth roughly $87,000 after the house was sold and debts settled, according to her will. The remainder was to be split equally between me and Derek, with small gifts to a few charities and a $5,000 bequest to her church. Simple, clean, exactly the kind of estate plan a careful 91-year-old woman would put together. The early distribution was documented on a standard probate court form. $12,000 to Derek Allen Marshall, requested by co-executor Lorraine Marshall, citing urgent financial need for vehicle repair and medical expenses. Uncle Ray had co-signed it because my mother told him both beneficiaries were receiving distributions and that she'd handle the second one. There was no second one. No matching $12,000 for Kayla Marshall. No record of any request. No record of my mother even mentioning it to the court. She'd taken $12,000 out of my inheritance and given it to Derek, and she'd done it by misleading Uncle Ray and never telling me. I want to be clear about something. My mother isn't a monster. She's not some cartoon villain twirling her mustache. She's a 60-year-old woman who has spent her entire life believing that Derek needs more help than I do, and she's gotten so used to acting on that belief that she'd apparently convince herself it was fine to redirect my grandmother's money to cover for him. I genuinely think in her mind she was going to make it right eventually. She probably told herself I didn't need the money as badly, that I'd understand. But that doesn't make it okay. It makes it worse, actually, because it means she did it casually, like it wasn't even a hard decision. I took photos of every document, scanned them, saved them in 3 places. Then I called a probate attorney named Janet Lowe, whose office was about 10 minutes from my apartment. Janet was exactly the kind of lawyer you want when family money gets messy. Mid-50s, direct, no wasted words. I sat in her office and laid everything out, and she listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "So your mother, as co-executor, authorized an unequal distribution using a false justification, and without notifying the other beneficiary?" "Yes." "And the co-executor co-signed based on a misrepresentation. Uncle Ray thought we were both getting the money." She nodded slowly. "You have a few options. You can file a formal objection with the probate court and request a full accounting. You can petition to have your mother removed as co-executor for breach of fiduciary duty, or you can try to resolve it privately first. What would you recommend?" I asked. "Depends on whether you want to preserve the relationship or protect your rights." I thought about that for about 2 seconds. I want to protect my rights, but I prefer to give them a chance to fix it before I file anything. "That's reasonable," she said, "but document everything and set a deadline. If they don't respond, we file." I paid Janet a retainer and drove home in my Civic, which, for the record, started on the first try, because it always does. Over the next few weeks, I kept watching, and what I saw confirmed everything. Derek's spending hadn't slowed down. New sneakers, a weekend in Asheville. He'd even started talking about upgrading to a bigger apartment so Megan could move in. On the surface, he still looked like a guy who had it all figured out, but I started noticing cracks. His posts got less frequent. He stopped showing the BMW in photos. When I saw him at Mom's house for a quick Sunday lunch, he was on his phone the whole time, texting with this tight expression on his face. And when Megan asked him what was wrong, he snapped at her and said it was work stuff. It wasn't work stuff. I also noticed something about my mom. She'd started calling me more often, which was unusual. Casual calls, checking in, asking how I was doing. She even asked if I needed anything, which she literally never does. It felt like guilt, but I couldn't be sure. One afternoon, maybe 5 weeks after the barbecue, I was eating lunch at my desk when my mom called. I let it ring twice, then picked up. "Hey, sweetheart, how's work?" "Good. Busy." "Listen, I want to talk to you about Grandma's estate. The probate is almost wrapped up, and you should be getting your shares soon." "Great. How much?" She paused, just a beat too long. "Well, after all the expenses and the charitable gifts, it'll probably be around $30,000 for each of you." I did the math in my head. If the estate was $87,000, minus the $5,000 church bequest, minus probate costs and charity gifts, the remainder should have been around $73,000 to $74,000. Split 2 ways, that's roughly $37,000 each. But Derek had already taken $12,000, which means his remaining share should be about $25,000, and mine should be the full $37,000. She was quoting me a number that assumed the $12,000 had been split between us. She was planning to quietly reduce my share to cover Derek's early withdrawal. "Sounds good, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Let me know when a check comes." I hung up and added the call to my timeline. Dates, amounts, what she said, what the real numbers were. The trap was set. Not by me, honestly. They'd set it themselves. I was just making sure I had a clear picture of exactly how deep the hole was before anyone started pretending it didn't exist. And then, About a week later, something happened that I hadn't expected. Derek's BMW disappeared from the parking spot outside his apartment. I know, because I drove by on my way to the grocery store the way I always do, since he lives on the same side of town. The spot was empty. No BMW, no car at all. I didn't ask about it. I didn't need to, because I had a feeling the phone call was coming. I just didn't know how soon. The call came on a Tuesday evening. I was making stir-fry, which I mention only because the oil was popping loud enough that I almost didn't hear my phone. I wiped my hands, picked it up, and saw Derek's name on the screen. He hadn't called me directly in probably 4 months. We communicated exclusively through the group chat and awkward small talk at Mom's house. So I knew, before I even answered, that this wasn't a social call. "Hey, Caleb, you got a minute?" His voice was different. The usual swagger was gone. He sounded like someone who'd been rehearsing what to say and was already exhausted by the conversation. He hadn't even started yet. "Yeah, what's up?" "So, I'm in a bit of a situation." Long pause. I could hear him breathing. "The BMW. I'm behind on payments. Pretty far behind. Actually, they're talking about repossession." "How far behind?" I asked. "For months." I turned off the stove. For months. That meant he'd stopped paying almost immediately after buying it. The cash he'd been flashing around, the trips, the dinners, all of it had been funded by not paying for the thing he was supposed to be paying for. "How much do you need?" I asked, not because I was going to give it to him. I just wanted to hear him say the number. Like, $8,000 would catch me up. "I know that's a lot. I'd pay you back. I swear, Caleb, I would pay you back." "Derek, you make decent money selling insurance. Where's it all going?" Another pause. "It's complicated. Megan and I have been spending a lot, and I had some credit card stuff, and then the rent went up, and it just kind of snowballed." "What about your savings?" Dead silence. The kind of silence that is itself an answer. "I don't really have savings right now," he said quietly. I let that sit for a moment. Then I said, "Let me think about it." "Caleb, the deadline is in 2 weeks. If I don't catch up, they take the car." I said, "I'll think about it, Derek." He thanked me 3 times before he hung up, which was 3 more times than he'd thanked me for anything in the previous 5 years. I went back to my stir-fry. It was overcooked. I ate it anyway. The next morning, right on schedule, my mom called. "Caleb, I need to talk to you about your brother. He called me last night. Then you know he's in trouble. Honey, he needs help. He's scared to lose that car, and you know how much it means to him." "It's a car he can't afford, Mom." I know, but he's your brother and you're doing so well. You've always been so good with money." She paused, and here came the pitch I've been waiting for. "I was thinking maybe you could lend him the money, just temporarily, and when his estate settles, he could pay you back from his share." I almost laughed. She was asking me to lend my brother money, which he would repay using estate funds that she had already partially redirected to him without my knowledge. The circularity of it was almost impressive. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When you submitted the early distribution from Grandma's estate, the $12,000 that went to Derek, were you planning to tell me about that before or after the estate settled?" The silence on the other end was so complete. I checked my phone to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "What are you talking about?" she finally said, but her voice had changed. Tighter. Higher. "I've seen the probate paperwork, Mom. The early distribution form. $12,000 to Derek. Authorized by you. Co-signed by Uncle Ray. The justification listed was vehicle repair and medical expenses. Derek didn't have vehicle repairs or medical expenses, and I never received a matching distribution. Caleb, that was supposed to be temporary." "Temporary? How?" "You were going to give me $30,000 when the estate settled instead of $37,000 and hope I didn't notice. I was going to make it right." "When?" She didn't answer. "Mom, you're a co-executor. You have a fiduciary duty to treat both beneficiaries equally. What you did isn't just unfair. It's a legal problem." "Don't you dare talk to me about legal," she snapped, her voice breaking. "I'm your mother, and Grandma was yours, and she wanted the money split evenly. She told me that herself. My mom started crying, not dramatic sobbing. Quiet crying, the kind that's supposed to make you feel guilty enough to back down. A year ago, it would have worked. Maybe even 6 months ago. I've already spoken with an attorney. I said, my voice steady. If this state isn't corrected, I'm filing an objection with the probate court. Derek's $12,000 gets deducted from his share, not mine. I get my full amount. That's not negotiable. Caleb, you're going to tear this family apart. No, Mom. This family tore itself apart when you decided one son's BMW was more important than the other son's inheritance. She hung up on me. First time in my life. About 40 minutes later, Derek called. He was not calm. What the heck is wrong with you? Mom's a wreck right now. She said you're threatening to take her to court. I'm filing a probate objection because she gave you $12,000 of my inheritance without telling me. She was helping me out. I was in a tight spot. With what, Derek? What was the emergency? I needed the money, okay? Things were tight, and I needed a cushion. So, the cash you were throwing around at dinner, the trips, the BMW down payment, that was my inheritance? He didn't deny it. He just pivoted. Dude, you have money. You've always had money. You sit there in your little apartment with your little car, hoarding every dollar like some kind of, I don't know, like you're better than everyone. I'm not better than everyone. I'm just not spending money I don't have. And I'm definitely not spending money that belongs to someone else. So, you're really going to do this? You're going to drag Mom through court. I'm going to file a probate objection, which is my legal right. If Mom corrects the distribution voluntarily, no court is necessary. But the $12,000 comes out of your share, not mine. Derek said something I won't repeat here. Something that went past damn and hell by a considerable margin and hung up. I sat at my kitchen table. The apartment was quiet. My phone sat there on the counter. And for about 15 minutes, nobody called and nobody texted. And it was the most peaceful 15 minutes I'd had in months. Then I opened my laptop, emailed Janet Lowe, and told her to file the objection, because I was done waiting for people who'd never once waited for me. The probate objection hit like a rock through a window. Janet filed it on a Wednesday. By Thursday afternoon, my mother's attorney, a guy she'd apparently retained using estate funds, which is a whole separate issue, had called Janet to discuss a resolution. By Friday, Uncle Ray had called me personally to say he was fully supporting my objection and that he felt sick about having co-signed that distribution without verifying the facts. I trusted your mother, he said. She told me you both needed the money. I should have confirmed it with you directly. That's on me. It's not on you, Ray. She lied to you. Yeah. He was quiet for a moment. She did. The court didn't need to get dramatic about it. Probate objections in cases like this are pretty straightforward when the paperwork tells the whole story. My mother had authorized an unequal distribution under a false justification, failed to notify the other beneficiary, and was planning to reduce my share to offset it. Janet's filing laid it out in black and white. Dates, documents, dollar amounts. My mother's attorney tried to negotiate. He proposed splitting the remaining estate 50-50 and forgetting the $12,000 discrepancy, which was essentially asking me to accept a $6,000 loss, so nobody had to admit what happened. Janet shut that down in one email. In the end, the court ordered a corrective accounting. The $12,000 was deducted from Derek's share of the remaining estate. My mother was formally removed as co-executor for breach of fiduciary duty, and Uncle Ray became sole executor for the remainder of the process. There was no criminal referral, no dramatic courtroom scene, just paperwork and consequences. I received my full share, $37,200 after final expenses. Derek received approximately $24,800, and he owed me nothing because the adjustment had already been made to the estate. Clean, fair, exactly what Grandma wanted. But the money was honestly the least interesting part of what happened next. Derek's BMW got repossessed 11 days after I filed the objection. A tow truck showed up at his apartment complex at 6 a.m. and took it. His neighbor told me about it later. Said Derek came running outside in sweatpants and stood on the sidewalk watching it drive away. I'm not going to pretend I felt nothing when I heard that, but it wasn't satisfaction. It was more like watching someone finally hit the bottom of a hole they'd been digging for years. Megan left him about 2 weeks after that, not because of the car specifically, but because once the BMW was gone, the whole facade crumbled. She found out about the credit card debt, the late rent payments, the fact that half the dinners they'd been going were being charged to cards that were already maxed. She told Derek she felt like she'd been dating a character, not a person. And honestly, she wasn't wrong. My mom didn't speak to me for almost 2 months. That was hard. I won't pretend it wasn't. I'd sit in my apartment some nights and think about calling her. And then I'd remember the phone call where she cried to manipulate me, and the $12,000 she siphoned without a second thought. And I put the phone down. She finally broke the silence with a text that said, "I'm still your mother, Caleb." I responded with, "I know. That's why this hurts so much." She didn't reply for a couple days. When she did, she asked if I want to come for Sunday dinner. Just the two of us. I went. It was awkward. She didn't apologize directly, which bothered me, but she also didn't try to justify what she'd done, which I counted as progress. We ate chicken parmesan and talked about the weather and her garden and a new show she was watching. Normal stuff. Small stuff. The kind of conversation that doesn't fix anything, but at least proves the door isn't locked. We're not where we were. I don't know if we'll ever be. But I go to dinner about once a month now, and she stopped trying to recruit me into fixing Derek's problems, which is the most meaningful change of all. Uncle Ray and I got closer through all of this. He started calling me every couple weeks just to check in. He told me stories about my grandmother I'd never heard. He said she'd always known I was the one who understood the value of what she'd built, and that she'd told him once that I reminded her of my grandfather, who'd been a quiet, steady, stubborn man. I liked that. My dad called me after he heard about the state situation from Uncle Ray. We talked for about 45 minutes, which is the longest conversation we've had in maybe 10 years. He didn't say much about Mom, but he said, "You did the right thing, and I'm sorry you had to be the one to do it." That mattered more than I expected. And Derek? About 4 months after everything went down, his life looked completely different. He was driving a used Hyundai Elantra. He'd picked up weekend shifts at a warehouse to supplement his insurance job. He was living in a smaller apartment by himself, grinding his way back from a financial hole that was entirely self-inflicted. The Instagram post stopped. The group chat, which had slowly died after everything blew up, was basically dead. I didn't gloat. I didn't bring up the BMW. I didn't say, "I told you so." That's not who I want to be. But I will tell you about one moment. About 5 months after the repossession, I was leaving the grocery store and my phone buzzed. It was Derek. Not a call, a text. It said, "Hey, I know I don't deserve it, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not just about the money, about all of it. The jokes, the group chat stuff, everything. You were right about the car. You were right about a lot of things. I'm trying to do better." I read it twice. Then I put my phone in my pocket and drove home. I haven't responded yet. I'm not sure what to say. Part of me wants to forgive him, because he's my brother, and I remember who he was before all of this, back when we were kids, and he used to let me ride on the handlebars of his bike. Part of me isn't ready, because forgiveness shouldn't be free. And I think Derek needs to learn that some things take time to earn back. I'll probably respond eventually. Not today. Maybe not this month. But eventually. In the meantime, I'm doing fine. I got a promotion at work. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment. Not because I needed to, but because I want a home office. I still drive the Civic. It just hit 140,000 miles. And you know what? It runs great. A couple weeks ago, I was at a red light, and a brand new BMW pulled up next to me. White, tinted windows, looked exactly like Derek's. The driver glanced over at my car, and I could see him doing that thing people do where they size you up based on what you're driving. I just smiled, turned up my podcast, and when the light turned green, I drove home to my quiet, boring, fully funded, completely peaceful life. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. So, tell me, if you were in my shoes dealing with this kind of family betrayal and public mockery, what would you have done? Would you have gone to court? Or would you have let it slide for the sake of family peace? I really want to know what you think. Let me know in the comments below.